Assalamu alaikum, participants. Welcome to another another session with Dr. Khalid Zaheer. We've already floated what are we going to cover today, but it wouldn't be it wouldn't be too bad if Dr. Khalid Zaheer in his opening could tell us what is he going to cover today, so that goes on the recording as well. And inshallah, we'll just make a quick start. So over to you, Dr. Khalid.
Thank you very much. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulihil kareem. Today, as ever, we are going to have 4 sessions. 3 of them are going to be brief presentations from me. The first one is going to be explanation of a Quranic passage. Today, I have chosen verse 33 of Surah Tawbah, the 9th Surah. In the second segment, I will talk about, because I am talking about the understanding of religion and we are talking about belief in God. Today, I will touch upon the topic of the question as to why many people are turning towards atheism. The third question, the third segment is always on some current issue, and what issue can be more current than the Eid that is just around the corner, and the apprehension that there are again going to be, unfortunately, differences of opinion. So I'm going to talk about these 3 subjects, and then it will be question answers. So first I take the Quranic passage. It's Surah Tawbah, Surah number 9, which is also called Surah Barat. I am reading verse 33 of the Surah. It says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق. It is he who has sent his messenger. That is, it is God who has sent his messenger. بالهدى ودين الحق, with guidance and true religion. ليظهره على الدين كله, so that he may cause it to prevail over all other religions. وَلَوْ كَرِهَ الْمُشْرِكُونَ, even if the polytheists may dislike it, howsoever the polytheists may dislike it. It's a verse of the Quran which has been mentioned apart from this particular passage on 2 other occasions, in Surah Al-Fatah and in Surah As-Saf, Surahs 46 and 61 respectively. If you read the verse apparently in isolation from its context, it would create an impression as if the Almighty is requiring believers to make sure that the religion that God has given them should be caused to dominate and prevail over all religions. All religions of the world should submit to the religion of God, because it is Al-Huda, the guidance, and Wadeen al-Haq, and it's the religion of truth. Therefore, we have a significant number of Muslims, educated Muslims too, who are convinced by the idea. They have this passion which guides them to make sure that they are a part of a struggle which is ultimately aiming this objective to be achieved universally, all across the globe. That is, Islam should dominate over all other religions. And in religions, they also include ideologies, systems. So what people understand from this verse, and then what they put across as their objective, is that we are going to present this religion to others. If they accept it, well, brilliant. If they don't, then we will use our military might as and when it becomes available to us. If it is not available, we will muster it up, gather it, we'll prepare ourselves, and this is our ultimate objective. Which in other words means that there are Muslims who believe very strongly that we are virtually at war with the rest of the world, with the non-Muslims. And the idea is that God's religion must dominate over all other religions, all other systems. And the key verse that leads them to this understanding is the one that I'm reading before you right now. What I want to clarify, which I have done earlier as well, is the fact that this particular verse has come in Surah At-Tawbah, where the Almighty is talking about the phenomenon of His punishment that He inflicted upon the enemies of the Messenger, may God's mercy be on him, who did not accept the message of God despite the fact that it was presented to them most clearly. And they went ahead to oppose the Messenger and his companions. The Almighty has explained it in the Quran over and over again that it is His sunnah, His policy, that whenever He will send His Messenger, He will cause His message to dominate over the society. If people accept and believe in it, accept it and believe in it, they would succeed not just in the next life, but in this life as well. But if they will reject the message and go on to oppose it, not just in the next life, but in this particular life too, they are going to be punished by the Almighty. Another part of that mandate scheme of the Almighty is that the message the messenger brings is going to be caused to dominate over all other religions of the area, of the territory where the messenger comes. So in the case of the last messenger, Muhammad, Allah's mercy be on him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he too was a messenger of God, and his message was also meant to dominate over all other messages, all other ideologies of the area where he was sent as the messenger of God. So when you read it from our point of view, this verse is a part of the Almighty's plan to punish the enemies of His message and His messenger, His Rasul. And it's describing the fact that now that the messenger of God has come, God is going to make sure that the message that He has brought is going to actually dominate over all other messages. You look at it from the other point of view, the point of view of those who universalize it. They say that this is an all-time mission of Muslims to cause and enable the message of Islam to dominate over all other messages. So obviously it's an important question, it's an important debate, and it needs to be continued for us to be able to get clarity that the Almighty is mentioning His era-specific expectation from the believers who were the companions of the Prophet to make sure that it happens. And He also says at the end of one of these verses in Surah Al-Fatah, وَكَفَى بِاللَّهِ شَهِيدًا. And God is enough as a witness to the fact that this is actually happening. It's going to happen. Right? That brings me to the second part of today's presentation. The second segment is, why are people turning to atheism in the modern world more and more. Atheism, as it stands today, presents its case very confidently and says that religions in general, and Islam included in it, were a good introduction to the uh, human societies for them to be able to work out sense out of this existence. There was a time when religions made good contribution. They believed that religions went through certain pattern of evolution. There was polytheism first, then man evolved and became monotheist. And while it was happening, it happened that there were people who came to different nations claiming to be God's prophets, messengers, and they continued to urge people to believe in God. But according to the atheists, uh, that era is over. That era was a need of the time because human knowledge was as yet limited. There were many perplexing questions which humans were not able to answer, and therefore they took refuge in the understanding of God to begin with many gods and then one God to be able to answer those questions. Um, who has created us? How have we been created? Um, why does rainfall take place? Um, why is it that volcanoes take place? Earthquakes take place, storms, cyclones, floods, etc. happen. Um, why is it that people are taken ill? How do crops grow, etc. So you name it. There are questions after questions in life which come to our mind, and each question needs answers. And when there were no answers, so say those who reject religion and adopt atheism, they just say it is God who has done all this. So why has one thing happened and why does another thing happen? Why trees? Why rainfall? Why earthquakes, etc.? All answers, all questions were answered by one big answer: God. God is doing it. It's God's will. That's how He has planned. The atheists and those who reject religion, they say that now human knowledge has advanced so much, so rapidly, and the answers that modern knowledge provides to all these questions are far more convincing and far more confident, logical, that there is no need for religion anymore. And in fact, it really has become clear that religion has become outdated. They say that all these questions, where did we come from, uh, and how did we come about to be what we are, etc. They have been answered by the Big Bang theory, the theory of evolution, and many other explanations of these phenomena, which now cause humans to be comfortable, and therefore they don't need any supernatural explanations. They don't need to have a God who would be the answer of all these questions. What do we have to say about it? Well, the answer is that the explanation provided by these people is in actual fact answer to the question, why? Why has it all happened? The other question, who is doing it, is not addressed by them. And they say that all this is happening on its own. Uh, a Big Bang took place, and then the evolution process has gone for millions of years. But who has done it? Nobody. In other words, uh, atheists, they reject God, but the attributes of God, which are on display, which are functioning in this world, for us to be able to see God through those attributes. Atheists reject the entire concept of God, but see those attributes in this universe itself. In other words, in their opinion, this universe, this existence in itself is a God, because it is causing things to happen, causing them to happen neatly. There seems to be a lot of wisdom, control, and it seems that humans are being served and served brilliantly. But who isn't doing it? Nobody. Obviously, it is an absurd answer. But what they mean is that the system is taking care of itself. In other words, the system itself is a God. It is strong, omnipotent, it is knowledgeable, it is wise, it provides, etc. Why have such intelligent people gone to such an extent that they are saying things which don't make sense? I mean, how is it that all this is happening on its own? And this whole system somehow has the ability within itself to do things on its own in a brilliant way, in a way which is causing human life to stay, to flourish, to be able to make progress, etc. The reason is that the modern Western world has reacted to the medieval Western European model of church and monarchy. There were kings and there were religious people who came together and formed a system whereby they complemented each other. One supported the other to cause injustice, tyranny, and suffocation of human intellect and liberty and openness, to cause lots of miseries over centuries. So when humans ultimately, well, liberty, democracy, renaissance, uh, liberalism, scientific revolution, industrial revolution, all these important landmarks in the history of Western Europe, when they took place one after the other, and they finally got liberated from the shackles of the church and the monarchy system of kings. Uh, Ultimately, those who started making progress in science, philosophy, and other intellectual endeavors, they rejected religion for it being the biggest obstacle in the way of progress, in the way of rationality. And in rejecting religion, the most significant thing that was rejected was God. So now rejecting God is a fashion because God is synonymous with religion. And whatever harm is done by religion and religious people to the societies is actually attributed to God. So God is unfashionable. But as I said, the fact of the matter is that you cannot explain this universe, this life, without understanding God and presenting Him properly. If you will reject Him, well, you will have to create another God. And that God is what I say has been created by atheists in the manner they explain this system and the way it's evolving, it was designed. Uh, they are unwittingly admitting that God is not there, but this existence, this universe, is a God in itself. Now I come to the third segment, in which is the issue of celebrating one Eid. Um, you see, there are two issues at hand. One is the manner Eid, Ramadan, or for that matter, the beginning advent of any lunar month is to be decided. There are two views. One view says that you ought to look at the moon, the crescent, with your naked eye, or else you will complete 30 days of the month. There is this other view that says that viewing moon crescent is not important. What is important is that no matter what the weather conditions, uh, the moon should be there at its position, which, if the atmosphere was clear, would have caused it to be visible. So, in other words, the scientific ways of establishing as to whether the moon has appeared or not should be employed. The debate goes on. Let's hope that at some stage people come to an understanding and a compromise. But there are two other issues also which need to be talked about. One of them is that is it that Muslims all over the world should have one Eid? That is, should Muslims not declare Eid from, let us say, Makkah or Medina, and everybody else should follow? Uh, there are difficulties in this concept as well, although I'm very strongly in favor of this understanding, of this possibility. I think there should be a central decision for all Muslims that on such and such date we will have Eid. But this concept probably would not be possible if we insist on viewing crescent with our eyes, because for that you will have to wait for until the evening before the Eid day to establish as to whether there's going to be Eid the next day or not. But if you base your understanding or your confirmation, your decision that Eid is to be celebrated on a particular day of the year, uh, and everybody agrees to it, then it's possible for everyone to agree that if it could be scientifically shown that on a such and such date, crescent would appear uh, in the horizon of Makkah in a manner that if the atmosphere is clear, then the moon, the crescent, can be viewed. And I think it should be good enough for everybody to accept it. There should be general, common, central announcement for all Muslims all over the world. That brings me to the next point, which is that, you see, announcing the beginning of Ramadan, announcing that the next day is going to be the Eid day, is actually a matter that has got to do with Muslim unity. We Muslims should be united under all circumstances. That's what the Quran says. That's what the message of the Sunnah is. You say your prayers, we sit together, we go for Umrah, we go for Hajj, we are all together. Why on earth can we not be together while celebrating Eid, while announcing the month of Ramadan? Our religious opinions more important for us to make sure that they are imposed on everybody else? That's what the problem of sectarianism is. That as a sect, if you have a certain point of view, you make a firm resolve that you will not give it. That's what the people of Quraysh did in the Meccan era of the presentation of Islam. They were adamant. They could not accept wrong in religious matters. So what I'm saying is that Muslims everywhere, in Britain, elsewhere, should make sure, even common Muslims, ordinary Muslims, that they emphasize it strongly, clearly, to their imams, to their administrators of masajid, to their leaders, that we won't tolerate two Eids in our country, in our society. It is a shame. We become a laughing stock. It is against our religion. It is just not acceptable. Forget about your opinions. Forget about your arguments. I mean, the biggest argument is that Muslims should be united. You know better than me that when there is an announcement from two different groups or three groups at times, that they are going to celebrate 2 or 3 different Eids on 3 different days. Oh goodness me, there could not be a more poor advertisement of our religion. So I think it's high time that we build up this pressure on our religious leaders and tell them that, look here, we respect you, we understand your arguments, but the biggest arguments of all is the argument that we ought to have one Eid. For God's sake, make a sacrifice of your arguments and give some other group the chance to announce what they think is the right day of Eid, and you will be rewarded by the Almighty for making sure that you are ensuring that Muslim unity emerges and this polarization and sectarianism is finished. That finishes my part of the job. Now,
Thank you very much, Dr. Saab.
I'll try to answer your questions.
Yeah, so your voice is slightly breaking up. So maybe if you try turning off the webcam at this stage, maybe we can assess if it helps us hear your voice clearly. So now the floor is open for questions. Yes, so now the floor is open for questions. The participants, if you look at your mobile applications, on the top right hand corner, you will see 2 icons. One is a hand icon, one is a mic icon. If you click the hand icon, you can raise your hand and let me know that you want to ask a question. And then I can unmute you to allow you to ask it. So do we have any questions from the audience then? I'll give people 30 seconds. We've got a question from Syed Abdullah. I am going to unmute him. Syed Abdullah Saab, you can click on the mic icon and unmute yourself and ask the question.
Assalamu
alaikum.
Okay, so recently I came across this hadith. We're talking about so this hadith emphasized on how we should deal with a tyrant or an oppressive regime. So apparently there was this companion who asked the Prophet about if he comes across a leader who is oppressive, what should he do? And the Prophet ﷺ replied that even if he was oppressive towards you, even if he flogged you, and even if he took away your property and your land, you should still be obedient to that leader. This was actually quite disturbing to me, and I was wondering that, I mean, because for me there were two things that could be done, and civil disobedience in my mind was the lesser or less aggressive compared to actual violent protests. So I was wondering that even if we cannot do something like that, then how how do we bring about a change? I mean, is there any option? Because we just have to be obedient. And for someone who's being flogged, and someone who's being stripped away from, or someone who's had his property taken from him, it's very difficult for that person to actually then be obedient to the one who's causing him all that suffering. So what within Islam, for example, even with the British Empire, we were supposed to, so we actually had no options but to submit. We could not protest. I mean, that's Islamic then.
You see, Brother Abdullah, we, could you mute your, yeah.
I've muted.
The difficulty understanding religion through hadith is precisely what you are going through right now. We keep repeating over and over again that hadith is brilliant, but understanding hadith is a tough matter because of the very nature of hadith. These are scattered pieces of information which have been very carefully collected, critically examined, and presented in different categories of titles, chapters, etc. But the fact of the matter is, that one thing that is more often than not missing in hadith is the context. You see, the companion asked the Prophet ﷺ this question. God knows what the full context was. What was the total picture that was there at the moment when the question was asked? And what exactly was the full answer of the Prophet? This context can only be provided to hadith by the Quran and other ahadith relevant to the subject. The Quran tells us about the affairs of the Muslims, that they have to be run on the basis of mutual consultation. So, Surah Shura, Surah 42, verse 38 says, Amruhum Shura Bainahum. Muslims, their affairs are to be run and decided on the basis of mutual consultation. Now, this is a very general principle, but obviously, from this general principle, we will derive a system of mutual consultation and would make sure that no matter whether it is the ruler or his ministers, advisors, or other administrators, or the common people, the one principle that can never be overruled is the principle of mutual consultation. So, how is it possible that if there is a ruler who is causing problems to the Muslim society, is not allowing people their freedom that they deserve, and is causing hardships to them for no justifiable reason, yes, it is a part of the discipline that we won't revolt. There is not going to be a mutiny, declaration of complete lawlessness, which is a greater evil. However, that would be a matter for a temporary period. The ruler who is doing these things will have to be brought to the court of law, because the reason why I'm saying it is that the Quran mentions another important statement relevant to the running of the affairs of the Muslim community, which is a statement that is mentioned, the principle that is mentioned in verse 59 of Surah An-Nisa chapter 4. It says, believers, Ati'ullah wa Ati'ur Rasul, you obey God and obey the messenger, wa ulul amri minkum, and those in authority amongst you. However, it follows it up by saying, فَإِن تَنَازَعْتُمْ فِي شَيْءٍ, then if you disagree with each other on any matter, فَرُدُّوهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَالرَّسُولِ, then you refer that dispute to God and the messenger. In other words, God is telling us that ordinarily we should follow and be obedient to our system, to our rulers. However, whenever there is a dispute and we disagree with them, then there has to be a mechanism, a system, a court of law, some panchayat, some qazi, whatever, who should be referred to find out from them as a final verdict whether the ordinary people are right or the ruler is right. So what I'm saying, brother, is that hadith has to be understood in the light of all these principles of the Quran, and you would find that at least theoretically, at least as a matter of principle, the Almighty does not want us to submit to the tyranny of a ruler who is zalim, who is oppressing people, and we keep doing it without uh, taking any action for forever. That's not what Islam stands for. That's not what we have been taught.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab. We've got another question from Brother Farooq Butt. I'm lowering his hand. Brother Farooq, you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Khalid. Sir, my question is regarding Sadaqatul Fitr. There's actually two parts of this question. One is that we know that Sadaqatul Fitr is have to be paid for every person of your family, like for the children.
Right.
And this actually came from one of my friends. He said, but and they said Sadaqatul Fitr because if you have made any mistakes during the Ramadan, so it will from you as a charity that you rectify that mistake and you pay the Sadaqatul Fitr for the Ramadan. But to the children under the age of 12, they're not compulsory to have fasting. So why we have to pay Sadaqatul Fitr for the children and for the adults?
Okay. You see, whenever there is an explanation on why a certain act is to be done, and there are more than one reasons mentioned, you try to work out a sequence and decide as to which of the explanations, which of the justifications is the real one and which one is the secondary one. There are two justifications, there are two explanations offered for the question why fitrana is to be given. The first one is that so that the poor people in the community should also be able to have at least 2 decent meals on the Eid day. And the second explanation mentioned is that it would enable the one giving fitrana to be able to be expiated, to be able to be removed his sins and the weaknesses that were shown during fasting. They could be cleansed. Now, to me, this second explanation is actually secondary. The real explanation is that you are helping out another poor family. So you look at the beauty of it. You have a family with, let's say, 5 family members. So you are making a payment, and there is another family which is poor and has the same number of people, and they're going to be helped to be able to spend at least the Eid day with good meals, 2 meals that they will have.
Okay.
So the other of your sins or whatever faults that you committed, they are going to be cleansed. It is a secondary explanation. It's something that would follow, but it's not the primary explanation.
Okay, so it's basically helping the family, other
Absolutely.
poor family members, or to the
Yes.
in the community.
Right.
The second question relating to this one is it normally what they over here in the UK or in Pakistan, I heard that they say to give the Sadaqatul Fitr is your one meal, and the other explanation is 1 day meal, like a two time. Normally in the Ramadan you have a sahur and an iftar. So is it one time meal, or is it sometime, because in here they say it's £3 or £4, because this is normally you spend for one time meal. So what's the amount? Is it for two time meal or one time meal?
If you look at the explanations that are offered for as to how much you should spend, you would find that there are at least three or four options. And
Okay.
the value of how much fitrana a person should give, it varies from individual to individual, because there are four different options offered, and the idea seems to be that it all depends on who you are, how well off you are, how much you can afford to give. The basic idea, when it's clear that it's two meals for the day, for every on behalf of every member of your family, and then you when you have to work out as to what does it actually mean, one meal. I mean, what value does it carry? The answer is that it depends on how well off you are, how much you can afford. So you think of it and you say that I want a family to be helped out by being offered two meals on the Eid day. What exactly should be the amount? I was just thinking of it, and I made a payment which was on the basis of the lowest of the possible fitranas. And then I realized that this is too low. So I said to myself that, I should at least double it, so
Mm.
that, the amount will become a little decent enough for the family or the people who are going to be helped to get a reasonable meal, a good quality meal for right. So I think it would vary from individual to individual and from family to family.
Okay, so thank you.
But
The
answering your question, two meals, what meal? Two meals.
two meals actually for the like you do Ramadan, two meals in one
Right,
one
right.
fasting.
One day. Yeah.
Okay, now I totally forgot what I was going to ask, but another question not relating to this fasting, the last question when I come back. Um, somebody sent me a hadith that in Prophet's time, one of the Sahabi, uh, uh, the companion of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he tied himself to a pillar, and he was saying, "I'm not going to remove myself until God, forbids my sins and forbidden my sin." And the ayah come to the Prophet that person, the Sahabi, should go and ask the Prophet to say some dua for him. Is that a hadith somewhere? And from where, what they basically get out of it, that's why you need somebody like Peer Saab or somebody to go and ask him to pray for him for his sins. Is that a correct hadith? And is this something like?
I was answering to Brother Abdullah's question, and I said the same thing, which I'm going to repeat to you, that it is
Sorry.
God's great blessing upon us that we have the Quran with us, which is the ultimate authority in religious matters. And the Quran makes it absolutely clear that no matter how big the sin, if a person repents sincerely, his sin is forgiven. The Quran talks about shirk, polytheism. It talks about qatl, murder. It talks about zina, fornication, adultery. The three biggest crimes. It talks about them in Surah Al-Furqan, the 25th surah, towards the end, and says that those who will continue to commit these crimes shall be consigned to the hellfire to dwell there forever, and the punishment is going to continue to build up and increase on them, except for those who repent, believe again, and do good deeds. For such people, their the evil part of their deeds is going to be cleansed, removed, and replaced by good deeds. So that is an absolutely clear statement, unmistakable statement in the Quran, which no incident can go against. However, we also know from the Quran that sometimes there were some people who actually committed a crime that in its nature was against the Prophet ﷺ himself. That is, there were hypocrites who did not accept the Prophet wholeheartedly, the way a believer should. So the Almighty made it binding on those hypocrites to, if they wanted to come out of the evil ways, they had to first go to the Prophet and ask him to forgive them, because their crime was actually a crime that was committed against him. So it all depends on the nature of the crime. There is no room for intercession, shafaat, sifarish in Islam. We have been given the right to approach God directly, to seek His forgiveness. We do not need any intervention, anybody in between us and God to plead for us on our behalf. Yes, indeed, if somebody is able to get prayer of the Prophet, which the Quran does mention, and as I said, it was actually mentioned more particularly in the case of the hypocrites, then it would be an additional benefit. However, there is no concept of us getting cleansed only if there is someone in between, a Peer Sahab or whoever, who will plead for us. We are in direct connection with God, and God listens to our prayers and He forgives our sins, provided if we are asking for His forgiveness sincerely.
Yes, thank you, sir. The question I
Interrupt.
forgot. I just said quickly ask if I'm allowed to ask that question.
Because I've got a question waiting from brother Talat.
Okay,
If you want, I'll ask his question first, and then you can come back.
thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. So there's a question from brother Talat. He's typed that in the chat window, and it says, talking about the last segment of your conversation for unanimous Eid, if we emphasize too much on one Eid, isn't that going to create more polarization and divide in the community rather than unity? As some sects so rigorously adamant for the implementation and imposition of their sect's views.
You see, when I emphasize on Muslim unity, obviously it's a strong desire. It's an objective mention in the Quran. But obviously, when you will go about to achieve that objective, you will do it wisely. I mean, the first step in the process, in the way of achieving unanimity or Muslim unity, would be discussion, negotiations. And people will talk to each other and tell them, inform the other group that, look here, the idea is to be united. Let's not make our religion a laughing stock for others. No matter what our views, they cannot be bigger, stronger than the goal of Muslim unity, the image of Islam. I think people are rigid because they are not shown the other problems, the other issues. Life is far more complex than just a simple one way of approaching matters. There are so many people in different sects who have a myopic view, one-sided, narrow view. They don't realize that the problems are far more complex. They don't realize that at times it is a better idea to give up their views for the sake of a higher ideal. So I think when I say Muslim unity, what I mean is that this unity needs to be achieved, and the goal needs to be targeted in a wise manner, so that the people come to talk to each other, and we remove our differences and our inhibitions and biases. Over.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Saab. So I'm guessing what you're saying is that in matters of practice where the collective issue is involved, we just do consultation and maybe using a democratic method make a decision um, using the majority's view and follow it through because
Absolutely. Very
that
good point.
maintains a
Very
certain
good
amount
point.
of.
That's right.
So people can individually disagree, but in collective matters, maybe they should just be more democratic
Absolutely.
and
I
support
think you
each
made a
other.
very good point. That mutual consultation. That's right. And go for the majority vote. You should have a right to say that I disagree with the majority vote, but I'm still going to follow it. That's what the spirit should be.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much for that, Dr. Saab. We are coming close to the end of our session as well. Farooq Bhai, if you want to ask your last question.
Very quickly, Dr. Saab, the about Sadaqatul Fitr, because they announce is one person is like say here for £4, but if the family of four or five and they have a two-time meal, like less than £4 or £5, like if they cook in the house. So I just want to know, is it what you can buy from the market for one person, or you can a family of five can make food for two times uh, in the house because obviously it's cheaper.
Absolutely. You will do the job. You will have achieved the purpose for it. You see, when a collective announcement is made for matters like these, it's just for the it's just for the sake of convenience. You know the spirit, you know the purpose, and you are achieving it directly. Well, that's the best way of going about it. Make food, no matter whether it's cheaper than £4 per head or not. Make two good meals and serve a family who have a number of members that are equivalent to your family members. So you'll do the job.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions from the participants? Maybe we can take one last question before we close. Everybody's mic is on unmute. If they want to unmute themselves and ask a question, they can do that. So no questions are forthcoming. So I'll just quickly ask a question, Dr. Saab, and hope that you can respond to it in maybe just 2 minutes, because this is like a big question. At the start, uh, you mentioned the verses of Quran that talk about the famous issue of ikamat ad-din, and and the view that some people have that Islam should dominate. Well, the question I would like to ask is, if Islam does not need to dominate, then what is the point of God's religion? I mean, if God's religion is not going to dominate, then it is going to be like any other kind of worldly philosophy out there, and it would be no different. And we at least hope that it would be different from what other people put forward.
A good question. You see, there could be two approaches to the question of ensuring that God's religion dominates. One is that you think that it's a duty upon you and all other fellow Muslims to make sure that you will use all your means, your arguments, your connections, and your military might to make sure that this goal is achieved. If that is what religion is telling us, then it is actually a formula for the disaster of this world. Because that actually means is, what it means is that God, Islam, is telling its followers to just fight until such time that they conquer the entire world. That's not what we are expected to do. The other formula, the other way could be that we make sure that this religion dominates over all religions through our efforts, through convincing others, through making sure that our point of view gets across. We are confident that this religion is from God, and therefore, as and when we will be able to clarify our religion to others, they will come close to it. You are now a part of Europe. You have democracy over there. You should have confidence in the ideology of God on the one hand, and in your system on the other. Continue working out a way to be able to achieve this objective ultimately. We are in no hurry. After all, let's face it, for the last 300-400 years now, we have no dominance of this religion anywhere in this world. So God wants us to convey the message to others, and when others are going to accept it, and you will get an opportunity, you will also make sure that God's religion gets implemented in the collective matters of the society as well. However, to say that it dominates through military might is to actually paving the way for bloodshed. And you know already that God does not allow us to kill even one individual, what to speak of scores and hundreds and thousands of them. So I think God doesn't contradict himself. He gives us his instructions, which are consistent with all other expectations that he has given us. And the only way that we can justify this particular verse now is that we do it peacefully, intelligently, academically, through arguments, through persuasion, through dawah.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Shah, for that. We've come to the close of our session. And I'd like to thank the participants, and I'd like to thank you as well for another enlightening session.
Thank you very much. Jazakallah.
All right.
Assalamu
I'll be
alaikum
in.
wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.